All right. Let's talk about the Horus Heresy, you know?
Hmm.
One of those moments in Warhammer 40K that really gets you thinking about all the what-ifs.
Yeah.
Like, just imagine the Roman Empire at its absolute peak. Just legions conquering everything in sight, and then suddenly, boom, betrayal from within just rips it all apart.
Right.
It's about ambition, treachery, the pull of chaos, all
Yeah.
playing out on this backdrop of these huge space battles and superhuman warriors.
It's amazing how this event happened thousands of years before the current Warhammer 40K setting, but it still has such a huge impact, on the 41st millennium.
Yeah.
It shows just how deep the lore is and how one event can have these ripple effects, that change a whole galaxy.
To really get the scale of this whole thing, we need to rewind all the way back to, like, humanity's darkest hour, the Age of Strife.
Okay.
So picture this. Warp squirms are raging across the galaxy, cutting off human worlds and throwing them into chaos and just barbarism.
Yeah.
Earth is a wasteland ruled by these techno-barbarian warlords who are just constantly fighting each other. Basically the edge of extinction for mankind.
It's like humanity was in desperate need of a savior, some unifying force to pull them back from the brink, and that's when the Emperor steps in. He comes out of the shadows, this being with immense power and intelligence, determined to bring humanity back together and lead them to a better future.
The sheer scale of the Emperor's Great Crusade is just mind-blowing.
Yeah.
Over 200 years, he commands his armies across the galaxy, conquering planet after planet, bringing over 2 million worlds back under human control.
It's crazy.
This is a golden age for mankind, a time of crazy expansion, reunification, and tech advancement.
And to do this massive task, the Emperor made his strongest weapons the Primarchs.
Oh, yeah.
They weren't just normal super soldiers, they were his sons. Each one designed with special skills and leadership meant to command their own legions of space marines.
Right.
Each Primarch was like a living embodiment of the Emperor's will, making them incredibly powerful leaders, but also giving them specific weaknesses that chaos could use against them.
But here's where it gets interesting. The Chaos Gods, those beings of anarchy and darkness, they saw the Emperor's growing power as a threat, especially the Primarchs. So in a really clever move, they scattered these Primarchs as babies across the galaxy through the warp, hoping to corrupt them and turn them against their father.
This scattering adds this element of chance and free will, to the story.
Right.
It shows that even the Emperor's perfect plan could be messed up by fate. It set things up. So each Primarch would be shaped by where they landed and for seeds of doubt and ambition to be planted in their hearts.
As the Great Crusade went on, the Emperor started meeting his Primarchs again, one by one.
It must have been wild.
Each reunion was a moment of celebration, but also potential danger.
Yeah.
These weren't mindless followers. They were complex individuals, each with their own strengths and weaknesses.
And it was those weaknesses, those vulnerabilities that the Chaos Gods wanted to exploit. Take Lorgar, the Primarch of the Word Bearers. At first, he was totally devoted, but when the Emperor rejected his religious zeal and ordered the destruction of his huge monument on Monarchia, Lorgar felt betrayed and lost.
That makes sense.
This opened the door for chaos to whisper to him, promising him power, and a different kind of faith, one where he and the other Primarchs would be worshipped as gods.
The Emperor rejecting Lorgar's worship was a big turning point.
Totally.
It highlighted the clash between faith and reason.
Wow.
The Emperor's vision of a secular scientific Imperium versus Lorgar's desire for a galaxy united under religious devotion.
Yeah.
This tension would become a major reason for the Horus Heresy.
And then there's the triumph of Ulanor, the high point of the Great Crusade success.
Right.
It was a total victory against a huge orc empire, a moment of unmatched glory for the Imperium.
It sounds like it.
But it also marked a change in the Emperor's plans.
How so?
He said he had work to do on Terra and named Horus Warmaster, putting him in charge of the whole Great Crusade.
This decision, while it seemed logical at the time, would have huge consequences.
Yeah.
Some Primarchs felt confused and kind of hurt by the Emperor's sudden retreat to Terra.
Yeah, I bet.
They questioned his motives and felt uneasy.
It's understandable.
Horus, now burdened with leading everything, started to feel isolated and vulnerable to the whispers of chaos planted by Lorgar and his agents.
It's a classic tragedy. A hero given immense power only to be consumed by doubt, ambition, and a desire for something more.
Yeah.
This is where the Horus Heresy really begins, in the shadows of doubt and the whispers of betrayal. The real horror of the Horus Heresy, like just how awful it truly was unleashed during the Dropsite massacre at Isfahan.
Oh, wow.
It was a trap planned out so carefully. Horus tricked the loyal legions into coming to the planet, pretending it was to put down a rebellion, but then he just unleashed his traitor forces on them.
Man, I can't imagine the shock of those loyal space marines, landing on the planet expecting to fight alongside their brothers, and then boom, a storm of bolter fire and the realization that they've been betrayed.
Right. It's a moment that really captures the tragedy of the whole heresy,
Yeah.
the breaking of brotherhood and this descent into unbelievable violence.
The fighting at Isfahan just brutal.
Absolutely.
This wasn't some strategic battle. It was a desperate fight for survival, with Primarchs fighting each other, heroes falling to treachery and bloodshed and loyalty, just shattered by ambition and the influence of chaos.
It was a real mess.
One of the saddest moments has to be the death of Pharismanus, the Primarch of the Iron Hands,
Yeah.
known for his stoicism and loyalty. He was confronted by Fulgrim, his once close friend who had fallen to Slaanesh, the chaos god of pleasure and excess.
Their duel shows just how tempting chaos can be.
Right.
Fulgrim, obsessed with perfection and pleasure, tempted Ferris with promises of power and transcendence. But Ferris, loyal to the Emperor, refused, and Fulgrim just struck him down, taking his head as a trophy for Horus.
Isfahan really set the scene for the rest of the heresy.
Totally.
Loyal legions were shattered and the galaxy was thrown into a brutal civil war.
Battles were everywhere, across star systems, with countless worlds becoming battlegrounds in this conflict that threatened to destroy humanity.
It's crazy to think about.
We have to remember that Horus's betrayal wasn't just a military takeover.
Right.
He had been building alliances and playing on the ambitions and grudges of other Primarchs,
Yeah.
using their weaknesses and insecurities to turn them against the Emperor.
Like Angron of the World Eaters.
Yeah.
He was already driven by rage and tortured by the butcher's nails in his head.
Making him the perfect target for Lorgar.
Right.
The promise of violence and revenge appealed to Angron's basic instincts, pushing him further down a path of destruction.
Those butcher's nails were something else.
Horrible implants meant to make him more aggressive and fearless, but they came with a cost inflicting constant pain and making his rage almost unbearable.
It's sad because you can see how vulnerable he was to Khorne, the chaos god of war who thrives on bloodshed and violence. And then there's Perturabo of the Iron Warriors, brilliant strategist and architect, but also deeply resentful and bitter.
He always felt unappreciated, like his work for the Great Crusade was overlooked and belittled by his brothers and the Emperor.
Horus was a master manipulator.
He was.
He played on Perturabo's bitterness, offering him the chance to reshape the galaxy the way he wanted, a vision where military strength ruled.
It was a tempting offer for someone who felt ignored and dismissed.
Each Primarch's fall is a tragic story showing how personal this conflict got.
Yeah.
They all had motivations for turning against the Emperor. But in the end, they were all seduced by the promises of chaos, whether it was a power revenge or a twisted sense of purpose they felt was missing in the Imperium.
The scale of the heresy is just mind-blowing. We're talking entire legions of super soldiers clashing across the galaxy.
I can't even imagine.
Titans, those massive war machines walking across battlefields, leaving trails of destruction. The very fabric of reality being torn apart by the warp as chaos fought the Imperium. It was a conflict that spread across the galaxy, and so many worlds were caught in the crossfire.
One of the scariest campaigns has to be the Shadow Crusade, led by Lorgar and his new puppet Angron.
Yeah.
It wasn't just a military campaign, it was a campaign of terror and destruction, a calculated act of psychological warfare meant to break the spirit of the Imperium and spread fear across the Emperor's realm.
They didn't just attack military targets, they targeted entire populations, leaving tons of civilians dead and planting seeds of doubt and fear throughout the galaxy.
Their goal was to destroy faith in the Emperor and make way for Horus to take over.
Exactly.
Meanwhile, Fulgrim's fall into corruption reached its end with his obsession for an ancient Xenos weapon called the Angel Exterminatus.
He thought it held the key to ultimate power and would do anything to get it.
His search for the Angel Exterminatus took him deep into the Eye of Terror, a swirling vortex of chaos where reality is twisted and warped by the power of the Chaos Gods.
He was with Perturabo, who, even though he was loyal to Horus, still had doubts about Fulgrim's motives and the true nature of the weapon.
It was a dangerous journey showing the risks of unchecked ambition and the temptation of forbidden knowledge.
Fulgrim, driven mad by his lust for power, was willing to sacrifice anything to reach his goals.
Inside the Eye of Terror, Fulgrim revealed his true plan.
The Angel Exterminatus wasn't a weapon, it was a state of being, a level of power he planned to achieve by sacrificing Perturabo and taking his life force.
It showed just how far Fulgrim had fallen from a noble warrior to a monster driven by Slaanesh's hunger.
Exactly.
In a last act of defiance, Perturabo managed to disrupt Fulgrim's plan, destroying the relic that was draining his energy and killing his former brother in a fit of rage.
But even in death, Fulgrim wasn't defeated.
Right.
His essence ascended to daemonhood, becoming a prince of chaos, his once perfect form twisted and warped by Slaanesh, a horrifying reflection of his fall.
The heresy raged on, consuming world after world.
The Blood Angels, led by Sanguinius, faced their own challenges in the Cygnus cluster.
They were up against not only the forces of chaos, but also the Whispers of Slaanesh, trying to use their flaws against them.
It was during this campaign that the Blood Angels started suffering from a terrifying new problem, the Black Rage.
Oh, yeah.
A berserker fury, a bloodlust that took them over in battle, giving them incredible strength and ferocity, but also threatening to consume their souls and turn them into mindless killing machines.
Sanguinius, even with his angelic nature and loyalty to the Emperor, wasn't immune to chaos.
He fought to control the Black Rage that was plaguing his legion, battling on two fronts against the enemies of chaos and the inner demons tearing his legion apart.
The Shadow Crusade finally reached Nuceria Angron's homeworld.
Driven by vengeance against those who had enslaved him and given him the butcher's nails, Angron unleashed a brutal campaign.
He wanted to wipe out every trace of his past, leaving nothing but destruction.
His rampage was stopped by Roboute Guilliman and the Ultramarines.
Guilliman, horrified by Angron's savagery, tried to reason with him to remind him of his duty to the Imperium and what they had once fought for.
But Angron, consumed by rage and warped by Lorgar, was beyond reason.
Yeah.
He saw Guilliman as just another enemy, a target for his fury. The two Primarchs clashed, breaking their brotherly bond.
The Battle of Nuceria was a turning point for both Angron and Lorgar.
As Guilliman started to win Lorgar, seeing his pawn losing took drastic measures.
What did he do?
He unleashed the full power of his chaos rituals, tearing open reality and summoning a flood of warp energy onto the battlefield.
That's intense.
This surge of chaos energy completed Angron's transformation.
Wow.
He ascended to daemonhood, becoming a prince of Khorne, the god of war and violence.
Oh, man.
His physical form was twisted, his rage amplified 1,000-fold by the warp. He was no longer the warrior he was, but a monster of violence and destruction, a puppet of Khorne.
Angron becoming a demon was a huge blow to the Imperium.
It really was.
A reminder of how deep chaos had gotten into the Primarchs, twisting their good intentions and making them weapons of destruction.
While chaos was getting stronger, the Loyalists were getting ready for a last stand on Terra. Rogel Dorn, Primarch of the Imperial Fists, was tasked with fortifying Terra, turning the Emperor's palace into an impenetrable fortress.
He knew Horus was coming.
He did, and he was determined to defend the heart of the Imperium no matter what. The Siege of Terra, the climax of the Horus Heresy, was a fight on a scale you can't even imagine. It was a clash of titans, a battle for humanity itself, where the traitor legions, powered by demons and corrupted war machines, surrounded the Imperial Palace, determined to overthrow the Emperor and drag the galaxy into eternal darkness.
It's intense just thinking about it.
The defenders of Terra, outnumbered and outgunned, they fought with incredible tenacity and loyalty. They knew the fate of everything rested on them, and they were determined to hold the line against Horus's attacks no matter the cost.
It's a testament to their dedication to the Emperor.
Deep inside the Imperial Palace, Malcador the Sigillite, the Emperor's most trusted advisor and an incredibly strong psyker, stood as the last line of defense. He used his powerful psychic abilities to push back the demons, buying time for the Emperor to finish his secret project.
What was he working on?
A psychic beacon that would guide humanity through the dangers of the warp and ensure their survival in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium.
It sounds vital to their future.
It was. But even with their best efforts, the traitors were closing in. They broke through the outer defenses, and the fighting reached the palace itself, turning the Emperor's home into a brutal, close-quarters battleground where every inch was fought over in a storm of bolter-fire chain swords and psychic energy. It was a desperate fight for survival.
It must have been chaos.
In the heart of the palace, Horus finally reached the Emperor's throne room, setting the stage for a final confrontation that would be remembered forever. It was a battle between father and son, a clash of beliefs and destinies that would decide the fate of humanity. The Emperor, weakened from maintaining the psychic beacon, faced his fallen son, knowing that the survival of mankind was at stake.
Well, it's almost Shakespearean, a tragedy of immense proportions.
Their duel was a titanic struggle, a clash of unimaginable power. The Emperor's psychic might was unmatched, but Horus, empowered by the Chaos Gods, was a terrifying opponent. The throne room was destroyed, The very walls of reality threatened to crumble under the strain of their battle as these two godlike beings fought in a final confrontation.
It's hard to even comprehend the power involved in such a clash.
In a moment of both victory and loss, the Emperor managed to break through Horus's defenses, unleashing a psychic blast that shattered his son's soul, freeing him from chaos.
It sounds like a Pyrrhic victory.
The Emperor was mortally wounded, his body ravaged by chaos. His broken form was placed within the Golden Throne, a life support system of unbelievable complexity that kept him alive and allowed him to project his psychic beacon across the galaxy, becoming a guiding light for humanity in the darkness. He was transformed into a shell, a prisoner of his own power, forced to suffer for eternity to protect humanity from the horrors of the warp.
That's a heavy burden to bear.
Horus's death sent shockwaves through the traitor legions, their armies demoralized, and without a leader fell apart and eventually retreated, escaping back into the Eye of Terror and other hidden parts of the galaxy to recover and plan their revenge. The Siege of Terra was over, but the Horus Heresy had left a permanent scar on the Imperium, changing the course of human history forever.
It's hard to imagine the impact such an event would have on a civilization.
The Imperium, once a symbol of unity and progress, was now broken. Its armies depleted, its trust shattered, and the Emperor's dream of a secular, enlightened humanity was in ruins, replaced by a harsh, theocratic regime that worshipped him as a god. It was a far cry from the bright future he had hoped for.
It's a tragic fall from grace.
In the aftermath, Robert Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, emerged from the wreckage and took charge. He knew the Imperium needed to change to survive, to become something different if it was going to face the threats waiting for it in the darkness. He created the Second Founding, splitting the remaining loyal legions into smaller chapters to prevent any single commander from having too much power and repeating the mistakes that led to Horus's betrayal.
It was a necessary change to safeguard against future betrayals.
The Second Founding was a decision made out of necessity, but it also marked a fundamental change for the Space Marines. They were no longer the Emperor's personal armies, but protectors of humanity spread across the galaxy, each chapter serving as a bulwark against the encroaching darkness.
The Horus Heresy is a cautionary tale about ambition betrayal and the corrupting influence of power. It shows that even the best intentions can be twisted, and that the seeds of destruction can be found in the hearts of those closest to us, even in the face of overwhelming darkness. There are always those who fight for hope for a better future, even if that future is shrouded in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium.